Oh, man, this debate was wild. We got a lot of debate news. Here you go from Post Millennial. MSNBC's Nicole Wallace claims women object to J.D. Vance's mansplaining immigration during debate after female moderator offered false fact check. Quote, I actually think if you're a woman, that might be the worst moment J.D. Vance had because he was going to mansplain right over that mute button.
He was talking to everybody. I don't know, but he was talking to everyone who's watching the show.
He was pointing out they broke the rules.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're wrong. Mm-hmm. So, or they manipulate context. But here's the clip.
Yeah. And I actually think if you're a woman, that might be the worst moment J.D. Vance had, because he was going to mansplain right over that mute button. He was, and again, I don't pretend to know how everyone will react to this. I think that a lot of women in positions of authority that should command respect just by virtue of that dynamic will see themselves in some dude that disrespected them and talked over. I mean, there was a moment like that with the vice presidential in the Harris-Pence.
This is really interesting in the perspective of the feminist girl boss, because it is not true of all women. It is, in my experience, specifically these chip on their shoulder women. J.D. Vance, if he were to argue with a man, and he literally did with Tim Walz, they never accused him of mansplaining when he would interject or start talking over Tim Walz, which happened, I think, 2 or 3 times. But if it's the moderator breaking the rules, and he says, you're breaking the rules, let me clarify, you see her reaction. Oh, if a woman is, oh, how dare he? Are you kidding, lady? Stop being so fragile, okay? Sometimes you're wrong, and sometimes people want to argue. Just if you're a woman or a man, it doesn't matter. It's not, but there are these liberal mindset girl boss women who think that anytime a man has a disagreement, it's because she's a woman.
Mm-hmm. I actually think this comment makes it look like she thought the female moderators were weak and couldn't handle J.D. Vance.
Right.
Her being like, look, he just talked over them and I must defend them, means that they somehow mishandled this situation.
But it's so unfair. It's so unfair to J.D. Vance. Like he was corrected. He was not meant to be corrected. He's upset about it. I think he approached it in a very, again, presidential way, in a very respectful way. And then again, I had to look up the definition of mansplaining. That's why I never even hear that word anymore. I mute people like this in my life. In a condescending, patronizing, or oversimplified manner.
Yeah, where was he condescending at? He didn't condescend anyone. He was just telling them exactly
very
how
respectful.
they do it. Yeah,
very respectful. Yeah, it's just
especially when they were manipulating the circumstances, right? The whole thing was the only people who could fact check each other were the 2 vice presidential candidates, and they had already slipped one in that was like, science agrees that the world is warming or whatever, and he didn't respond to that one. He waited until he was like, look, this is a big deal. You're challenging me on immigration in Ohio.
I'm gonna throw this one out to all the men out there who are just, they want to hear this. Let me tell you the facts of this story. J.D. Vance was having a discussion on immigration issues. The female moderator interjected incorrectly. J.D. Vance said, first, you broke the rules that we agreed upon, but I will clarify. She got angry and began talking over him. And then on, MSNBC's Nicole Wallace gets offended that he dare try to correct a woman who was wrong. I wonder how many husbands are out there going like, I know exactly what that's like.
I just don't like the idea that women are like, yeah, we can do everything man can do, but you can't tell us if we're wrong because then you're mansplaining. Like, I don't understand. If they're so good and girl bossy, why does this lady need to come out and defend what happened there? I mean, either they could or couldn't handle the moment, and I think J.D. Vance was justified. I think it's really fragile of them to claim that this was a bad moment for J.D. Vance. I would have assumed, the January 6th questions or, something on his abortion response when he was like pro-family. Like, if you want to be mad about that, fine. But in this case, you're saying that these girl boss moderators did a bad job. That seems disloyal to the Klan.
I think they had nothing to criticize him on. He was calm. He was nice. He was apologetic. On the issue of abortion, talk about a masterclass. I cannot praise this man enough. He said, we've got to earn the trust back of these women that, we want to help. We want to help families. We want to make life better, all of these things. And it was a brilliant response. It was his response. Let me just break this down. It's a tough question for Republicans. Trump, he gets floundered on. It's tough because he's like, are you going to veto? Are you for the 6-week ban? Are you not? And he goes back. He went back and forth. J.D. Vance knows it's a negative and Republicans are looked down on the issue. So he turns it around by saying, we're going to earn your trust back, which is him acknowledging it's a bad issue for Republicans. But that's him saying, we're going to earn your trust back is we do have plans to help you. and we want you to, we want to prove it to you. I thought it was masterfully handled. When you see that kind of debate performance, what do they have to get mad about other than he tried to clarify a point on illegal immigration?
And he has a beard, so
And
I wanted to look at the exact quote as well. Just going back to the mansplaining things, I was just a bit triggered by it, and then we'll go to the abortion. He said, "Look at what he responded." He said, "The rules were that." I find I'm just going to read it, and objectively, anyone listening, especially women, let me know what you think objectively of what he said. The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you are fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. I don't find that to be condescending. I don't find that to be disrespectful or patronizing. Okay, I'll put that behind because I'm really a bit annoyed by it. But regarding the abortion, I think it was one of the best performances. I know it's a very tough topic for him, and I think the way he's kind of self-criticized, he's very, very self-critical about it, and I think he was just very, in my opinion, authentic about it. I know Tim Walz didn't do bad there as well, putting him on the spot. I think JD Vance's response there was one of the highlights for me.
Yeah, it's been disappointing, though, to see over the past couple of years. So even Mike Pence was more overtly pro-life. I think Vance had a throwaway line in there saying, I support life, something to that effect. But if you look at the way that the GOP is trending on abortion, it's pretty negative in the sense that now, JD Vance a few months ago came out and said that he's for the abortion pills, which is the way that 2/3 of abortions now happen. So, cards on the table, I'm about as anti-abortion as you can get as a Christian and a Republican. And I look at that and I hear people talking about that, in my personal life, not even just people who are as far in that issue as I am, but just like average, everyday, pro-life Catholic, something like that. And they're saying, the GOP is losing me on this one.
I'm curious, though, J.D. Vance's response was largely, we want to make it so that women who have unintended pregnancies do not feel as though abortion is their only option, which really has become the talking point from Democrats, right? Like, you're trapped with this man in this relationship you don't like. J.D. Vance referenced a friend who had been, in an abusive relationship, had opted to have an abortion, or the economic challenges of young families or young couples trying to buy houses or support these families is part of the obligation of pro-life Americans to win back people on the idea that family is good and that bringing a child into the world, even if it's not under ideal circumstances, is worth doing.
I also think for the right, there's a very important consideration, and that a large reason women get abortions is because they feel like they do not have support in having these kids, and it's the fault of men. We have a cultural problem that is not just men, not just women. It is a social development issue for us, and I don't want to put singular blame on any one group of people or generation, but look, housing is too expensive. Young people need better paying jobs. Gen Z needs to be able to get houses. Yes. We need young men to learn what it is to be a man and be responsible to the women that they are with. And women need to know that if they are with a man, that man is going to help take care of that child. Because that's what J.D. Vance pointed out, that he knew a woman. She was in an abusive relationship, and she was scared that if she had a kid, she'd have no support, and this guy was going to be really bad. And I don't know that I appreciate that reason for terminating a pregnancy, but J.D. Vance makes a great point that you certainly have to overcome that hurdle if we're going to win trust back.
Yeah, so I've been to Kenya a couple of times. So this is back when I was in high school, early college. And the way that they view children was one of the first things I noticed about their culture, where they unconditionally see children as a blessing. So I was spending a lot of time in the slums in Kenya, and, there are mothers there with like several kids, and they're like, my children are the best. So I think it's actually really a cultural problem and spiritual problem we have in the United States, where even though we are one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and obviously it's gotten worse over the past few years, people see it as a legitimate option just murdering your child, at the abortion mill or with the abortion pills. And I don't think that, statements like this are helpful at all in reversing that culture. I think there's a sense in which our politicians and our laws actually catechize the culture, and I think they ought to be fostering life. And I think you can, Vance had some ways in doing that. I think there's a good debate to have about social policy, supporting, mothers who, with maternity leave, stuff like that. You can talk about all that. But, in terms of, you have to also address the elephant in the room, which is the fact that we're back to over 1 million abortions every single year.
I think we see that on the surface, and I think it's important to ask what is causing it. And it's not just that young men are not growing up and taking responsibility. It's also because there are young women who are raised in a culture that tells them don't have kids right now, and who cares if you get an abortion. So we need to reinstill in our young people pride, responsibility, and hard work, right? And that means that, hey, look, if you want to have a relationship and it results in a pregnancy, take responsibility, both of you, and have a kid. And kids are good things, but that needs to be the general idea that is ingrained in people. I think too much right now, it's permanent adolescence. Young men are like, I can play video games, I can drink beer and go out with my friends. I got no responsibilities. I think it was Pete Buttigieg who said this. He was like, men are freer when abortion is available. Yeah. So I think it's not just that we have, there's all this abortion. Ron Paul said it great. It shouldn't be illegal. It should be unthinkable. And that's the very libertarian approach. I like that because socially we should say a woman should never have to deal with the thought that she's in trouble. It should always be a blessing. And young men need to be men and carry a big old sack of bricks to build a house and be responsible. And there's pride in that.
Absolutely. I like the trust comment because what I took from it was so far, Democrats have successfully sold to you that losing your right to have an abortion means that you're about to lose health care and fertility treatments and all of these things. They made it not just about the singular act of abortion, but about generally a threat to women's wellness overall. And I think what's interesting about choosing the words like we want to win back your trust is to say, you don't need to look at our policies in fear. Like if you were in a culture that said, we value life over anything else, and your community is going to rally around you if you have a pregnancy in a circumstance that's maybe not ideal for you, then it makes it less about what you are losing and the danger you are hypothetically putting yourself in to being like, okay, this isn't maybe what I was going to do, but I can handle this. I know that there's a much more optimistic and confident message. And I do think, I obviously, I would hope that no woman is in a position where she feels like abortion is the best solution for a pregnancy that she didn't want. On the other hand, I do think that this is one of the areas that the pro-life movement hasn't been agile enough because they allow the conversation to always be in response to this attacking position. They are the scary monsters and they need to kind of bring themselves out of the closets and say, no, we're actually just your neighbors. We're trying to help you.
And I think this is one last thing I'd say here is because I was with President Novak from Hungary just a few days ago talking about population collapse. I know it's completely not off topic, but it goes back to the point. This is a cultural issue, not only in the US, the high abortion rates, women not wanting to have kids, even men not wanting to have kids. And we had a very personal discussion, did an interview with her as well, and Stephen Shaw, who did a documentary on this. And I think this issue will gain more and more traction. Just the whole approach to having children, and people thinking it's just already too many people on the planet was not able to have kids. If you have kids, you can't achieve much in your career. It's either your career or having a family. I think the world is going to wake up to that problem impacting the US, impacting Europe, impacting Asia, and even you mentioned, not Rwanda, you mentioned Kenya. Even Africa's starting to head down that path, and of course Latin America. So I think it's going to end up being a much bigger issue.
Do you think it's going to be, real quick, do you think it's going to be too late?
We're already there. Within this century, numbers were insane. There's a reason Elon talks about it all the time. So she launched a foundation, and she talked to Elon about it as well. He's been pretty supportive. Within this century, multiple Asian countries, European countries, Canada, the US has done well because of immigration, but that's not sustainable because where are you going to get these immigrants from? Because Latin America is having that issue, Asia's having that issue, Africa will soon have that issue. Within this century, countries around the world will have their populations halve. That's dropped by half. And another scary thing is that there's never been a time in history where that was a global problem. It happened to the Roman Empire, for example. That was one of the reasons that, one of the main reasons that the Roman Empire is no longer here, the collapse of the Roman Empire. But there's never been a time in history where that was successfully reversed. Now, President Novak, the reason she's getting a lot of traction, she probably had performed the best with her country, Hungary. That was one of the worst countries. She improved it by about 30%. So she tested a few strategies, but there's no one strategy that works, which makes it a pretty scary problem. Now, remember when Elon was posting about it all the time? I'm like, why is Elon talking about this? And I ignored it. There's already too many people in the world, and yet it's a complete opposite.
Well, I will say population collapse is a more complicated detriment than people realize. One thing I would advocate for right now is reassessment of current human allocation. So we got a lot of people on this planet, but we got a lot of people who aren't as efficient as they can be. The body positivity movement where you got, people gorging themselves and doing these YouTube videos where they just eat endlessly until they get sick. Yeah. There was some woman, I think in South Korea, who ate so much for her live stream, her stomach ruptured and she died. Jesus, this is inefficient use of human energy. But don't get me wrong, humans are free to do kind of whatever they want, but there's got to be, certain limitations if someone's doing this harmful stuff. The issue with population is that the more people we have, the more specialties we have. Humans are brilliant. An individual human can master can master a task. There was a period on Earth where it was possible for a single human to know everything that humans knew. Population was very, very small. Humans knew very little. Now you're gonna meet a guy, and you're like, "What do you do?" It's like, "I make the paneling for the SpaceX Starship." You're like, "Just the panels?" "Yeah, I do metal fabrication, so I make panels." That's it. That's all you do. Yep. Back in the day, one guy might do everything to make a wagon. He's a carpenter. Now, one guy makes wire. One guy makes computer chips. One guy makes transistors. One person does these things. In fact, now they're being automated in a lot of ways. Humans, the more we have, the more finite we can have the specialties of each individual. To put it simply, it might take 1,000 specialty jobs to make a car. I don't know the exact number. A spaceship might take 10,000 specialty positions, because the more science we develop, the more specific an individual task has to be. That means we need dramatically more human beings, and population is collapsing. We lose population, we are going to lose technology, and we're going to wonder how we had spaceships in the first place. This is why I think Elon is 100% correct, and I'm a huge fan because he's building spaceships, trying to colonize Mars, working on bringing back free speech, telecommunications, electric cars. I'm like, dang, this guy's doing it all.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe, and we'll see you all there.